Baby, I can't wait to see you tomorrow while Emma's at work. That's what my husband David whispered into the phone at 2 a.m., not realising I was the one who'd answered my sister's call. My blood turned to ice as I stood in our kitchen, still holding the glass of water I'd gotten up for. 8 years of marriage, and in 10 seconds, everything I believed about us evaporated. I couldn't breathe, couldn't speak, just listened as he continued. Wear that black lace thing I bought you last weekend. The next morning, I watched him kiss me goodbye like nothing happened. I smiled back, told him I loved him too. Then I called in sick, drove to my sister Olivia's apartment, and waited. When she saw me sitting on her couch at noon, her face went white. "Emma, why aren't you at the office?" Before she could say another word, I played the voicemail I'd saved. Her hand flew to her mouth, tears instantly welling up. "He told me you were separated," she whispered. "He showed me divorce papers with your signature." I never expected my life would turn out this way. David and I met at a charity fundraiser 8 years ago. I was working as an event coordinator, and he was a charming businessman who made a generous donation that night. His smile captivated me from across the room. Warm, genuine, with a hint of mischief in his eyes. He approached me with such confidence, complimenting my organisational skills and asking if he could take me to dinner. I said yes, despite never being the type to accept dates from strangers. Our courtship was like something from a fairy tale. Expensive restaurants, surprise weekend getaways, and flowers delivered to my office for no reason at all. My friends were envious, my parents adored him, and my sister Olivia thought I'd won the lottery of love. 6 months later, he proposed on a private yacht under the stars, and I said yes, without hesitation. I believed I knew everything about him, his childhood in Boston, his business ventures, his dreams for our future together. The wedding was perfect, just like our relationship seemed to be. For 7 years, we lived what I thought was a dream life. David's business continued to thrive, though it required frequent travel. I built my own event planning company, which kept me busy when he was away. We had our routines, our inside jokes, our favourite restaurants. We talked about having children soon. He wanted to wait until his company was more stable, which I understood. There were occasional arguments, like any couple, but nothing major. Nothing that ever made me doubt us. The first small crack appeared about a year ago. I found a receipt for an expensive women's watch in his jacket pocket. When I asked him about it, he smiled, kissed my forehead, and said it was supposed to be a surprise for our anniversary the following month. I felt foolish for questioning him and apologised profusely. But when our anniversary came, the gift was a diamond bracelet, not a watch. When I mentioned it, he seemed confused, then quickly said he'd decided the bracelet suited me better. I pushed the doubt away. After all, he'd remembered our anniversary and bought me a beautiful gift. What was there to complain about? Then came the late-night business calls that he'd take in another room, the unexpected weekend trips that couldn't be rescheduled, the text messages that made him smile secretively. Each time I felt that twinge of suspicion, I'd silence it. David loved me. He wouldn't lie to me. I was being paranoid. The night everything fell apart started normally enough. David had returned from a 3-day business trip to Chicago. We had dinner together, watched a movie, and went to bed around 11 p.m. I woke up at 2 a.m., thirsty, and went downstairs for some water. That's when I heard David's voice coming from his office, the door slightly ajar. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but his hushed tone caught my attention. "I miss you too," he whispered. "These trips away from you are getting harder." My heart stopped. I froze in the hallway, glass of water in hand, as he continued. "Just a few more months of this charade, and we can be together properly." Charade. The word pierced through me like a knife. Our marriage, our life, was a charade to him? I should have confronted him right then. Instead, I silently walked back upstairs, set my water on the nightstand, and pretended to be asleep when he returned to bed. I lay there, inches away from the man I'd shared everything with for 8 years, feeling like he was a complete stranger. The next morning, I watched him with new eyes as he went through his routine. The way he hummed while making coffee, the familiar kiss on my cheek before he left, the casual "love you, Em," as he headed out the door. How many times had he done this exact routine after speaking to someone else the night before? I called in sick to work and spent the morning in a daze, trying to make sense of what I'd heard. Could there be an innocent explanation? Was I jumping to conclusions? Around noon, my phone rang. It was Olivia. She rarely called during work hours, so I answered immediately. "Hey, Liv, everything okay?" "Emma, sorry, I meant to call David. I must have hit your number by mistake." She sounded flustered. "David, why are you calling my husband in the middle of the workday?" "Oh, he's helping me surprise you with something for your birthday next month. Forget I called." She hung up before I could respond. Her birthday excuse might have worked if my birthday wasn't already 3 months behind us. Something wasn't right, and suddenly all those small doubts I'd been pushing away came rushing back. I drove to Olivia's apartment without calling first. We'd always been close. She was only 2 years younger than me, and we'd shared everything growing up. The thought that she might be involved with David seemed impossible, yet the knot in my stomach grew tighter as I approached her door. When she opened it and saw me, the colour drained from her face. "Emma, why aren't you at work?" I pushed past her into the apartment. It looked normal, no sign of David, no evidence of betrayal, but Olivia's nervous fidgeting told me everything I needed to know. "Are you sleeping with my husband?" Her eyes widened in shock. "Emma, it's not... You don't understand." "How long, Olivia? How long have you been seeing him behind my back?" Tears welled in her eyes. "He told me you were separated," she whispered. "He showed me divorce papers with your signature. He said you were only staying together publicly until the divorce was finalised." My legs gave out and I sank onto her couch. Divorce papers? With my signature? The room seemed to spin around me as she continued. "It started 6 months ago. He came to me upset, saying your marriage had been over for a while, but you were keeping up appearances. He showed me the papers, Emma. They looked real." I pulled out my phone and played the voicemail I'd recorded last night. David's whispered words meant for her. Olivia's hand flew to her mouth as she listened, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. "I don't understand," she said when it finished. "He was at your house last night, but he told me he was in Seattle for work." We stared at each other as the truth settled between us like a heavy stone. David hadn't just been cheating on me with my sister. He'd been lying to both of us, creating elaborate stories to keep his deception going. And something told me we were only scratching the surface. "Show me everything," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Every message, every gift, every photo. I need to know what we're dealing with." Olivia nodded, wiping her tears. "There's something else you should see." She disappeared into her bedroom and returned with a small velvet box. Inside was an engagement ring, a stunning emerald surrounded by diamonds. "He gave this to me last week," she said quietly. "Said as soon as the divorce was final, he wanted to make things official." I took the ring, examining it closely. The style was identical to my own engagement ring, except mine had a sapphire centre stone. A chill ran through me as I realised this wasn't just an affair. It was something far more calculated. "Olivia," I said slowly, "I think we need to find out who David Reynolds really is." I spent that night alone in our house, surrounded by wedding photos that now felt like props in an elaborate production. I couldn't sleep in our bed. The thought of lying where we'd shared so many intimate moments made me physically ill. Instead, I curled up on the guest room bed, my mind racing with questions. Who was the man I married? Was anything he told me true? And what did he want from us? The next morning, I woke up with a new sense of purpose. If David could live a double life, so could I. I'd pretend everything was normal until I discovered the truth. When he called to check in, I acted like the same loving wife I'd always been. I miss you, I told him, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. Miss you too, babe, he replied effortlessly. I'll be home tomorrow night. Should we do dinner at Giovanni's? Perfect, I said, wondering if he'd taken Olivia there too. I can't wait to see you. As soon as we hung up, I called Olivia. We need to search the house. Today. Little did I know, what we would find would shake the very foundation of everything I thought I knew about the man I married. Olivia arrived at the house an hour later, her eyes still red from crying. We stood in the foyer for a moment, two sisters united by betrayal, unsure where to begin. We should check his office first, I said. That's where he takes his private calls. David's home office was meticulously organised, every file labelled, every drawer neatly arranged. It was one of the things I'd always admired about him. Now, that precision felt sinister, like the careful planning of a predator. We searched methodically, checking every drawer, file and shelf. At first, we found nothing unusual, just normal business documents, receipts and correspondence. But when I removed a framed photo of us from the wall, I discovered a small safe I'd never seen before. Did you know about this? Olivia asked, eyes wide. I shook my head. Never. He must have installed it when I was away. The safe required a 6-digit code. I tried our wedding date, his birthday, my birthday, all the obvious choices. Nothing worked. Try 071215, Olivia suggested quietly. What's that? The day he first asked me out. The betrayal stung anew, but I pushed the feeling aside and entered the numbers. The safe clicked open. Inside was a stack of documents, bank statements for accounts I'd never heard of, property deeds in names I didn't recognise, and a passport. Not David's American passport that I was familiar with, but a British one. Same photo, different name. Jonathan Price. Who the hell is Jonathan Price? I whispered, hand shaking as I flipped through the passport. We continued searching and found a hidden compartment in his desk drawer containing a burner phone. The messages on it weren't to Olivia, but to someone named Melissa. They dated back over a year, filled with the same loving promises he had made to both of us. There were photos too. David with a beautiful blonde woman I'd never seen before, looking very much in love. Who is she? Olivia whispered as we scrolled through the images. I have no idea, I replied, but I'm going to find out. Using the contact information in the phone, I tracked down an address in a luxury apartment building across town. David had told me it was an office building his company was investing in. I'd never had reason to visit. The concierge recognised me immediately when we entered the lobby. Mrs. Reynolds, it's nice to finally meet you. Your husband speaks of you often? I forced a smile. Yes, I'm just picking up something from our apartment. I seem to have forgotten my key. No problem at all, he said, handing me a visitor's pass. Unit 1507, as you know. Olivia and I exchanged glances as we rode the elevator up. The apartment door opened with the spare key we'd found hidden in David's desk at home. Inside was a fully furnished luxury apartment, modern, sleek, and clearly lived in. The closet contained women's clothing, none of which belonged to me or Olivia. In the bathroom, we found makeup, perfume, and 2 toothbrushes. On the bedside table sat a framed photo of David with the blonde woman from the phone, both of them on a beach I didn't recognise. He has another life, I said, the reality of it sinking in. A completely separate life. We continued our search, finding credit card statements showing jewellery purchases I'd never received, hotel charges in cities he'd supposedly never visited, and restaurant bills from dates that weren't with me or Olivia. Each discovery was another knife in my heart, another confirmation that everything I believed about my marriage had been a lie. But the worst discovery came when we checked his financial records. David had been systematically draining our joint accounts over the past 2 years, moving small amounts regularly to offshore accounts. The business trips, the investments he'd told me about, they were all fabrications designed to explain his absences and the movement of money. "Emma," Olivia said gently as we sat among the scattered papers in my living room, "I think David might be dangerous." I looked up at her, ready to dismiss the idea, but something in her expression stopped me. "What do you mean?" She handed me her phone, open to a news article from 3 years ago. It detailed the investigation of a man who had swindled several wealthy women out of their life savings before disappearing. The composite sketch accompanying the article bore a striking resemblance to David. Different hair, slightly different features, but unmistakably him. "This can't be real," I whispered, even as the pieces began to fit together in my mind. We spent the next few days digging deeper, uncovering more lies. David's supposed alma mater had no record of him. The company he claimed to work for existed, but he wasn't on their employee roster. His parents, who he'd told me had died in a car accident before we met, were very much alive according to public records. But they weren't the people whose photos sat on our mantel. The man I married, the man who had charmed our entire family, was a phantom. When David returned from his business trip, I greeted him normally. I cooked his favourite meal, asked about his trip, and pretended everything was fine. All the while, my heart pounded so loudly I was sure he could hear it. But David, confident in his deception, noticed nothing amiss. Later that evening, as he reviewed some documents in his office, Olivia arrived as planned. The look of shock on his face when he saw us together was the first genuine reaction I'd seen from him in years. "Emma? Olivia, what's going on?" he asked, his voice steady even as his eyes darted between us. I placed the burner phone on the desk in front of him. Then the credit card statements, the photocopy of the fake divorce papers, the picture from the other apartment, and, finally, the British passport with his photo and a different name. "Who are you?" I asked simply. For a moment, something flickered across his face. Calculation, perhaps, or the formulation of another lie. Then, like a switch being flipped, the warmth in his eyes disappeared, replaced by something cold I'd never seen before. The transformation was chilling. It was still David's face, but the person behind it was someone else entirely. He didn't deny anything, didn't offer explanations or apologies. He simply collected his keys from the desk, straightened his jacket, and walked toward the door. "David," I called after him, my voice breaking despite my resolve to stay strong. "Don't you have anything to say?" He paused at the door, turning slightly. For a second, I thought I saw a flash of regret in his profile. Then he spoke, his voice eerily calm. "My name isn't David." The door closed behind him with a soft click, and just like that, 8 years of my life walked out without explanation or closure. "Should we call the police?" Olivia asked, her hand gripping mine tightly. I nodded slowly. "Yes, but first, we need to find out who else he's been lying to." The police were interested, but not especially helpful. Without evidence of a specific crime against me, he hadn't technically stolen from me since his name was on our joint accounts. There wasn't much they could do immediately. They took our statement and promised to investigate, but I could tell they'd seen cases like this before. The detective called him a romance scammer and warned us that such men were rarely caught. Meanwhile, the blonde woman from the apartment, Melissa, turned out to be as much a victim as we were. When we managed to contact her, she was devastated to learn about David's deception. She had known him as Michael Fletcher, a widower and international business consultant. They'd been married for 3 years in a private ceremony that, unsurprisingly, had no legal record. "He told me he travelled for work," she said, her voice hollow with shock during our meeting at a quiet cafe. Said he was building a better life for us. He told me the same thing, I replied, feeling a strange kinship with this woman I should have hated. Melissa showed us photos of her family gatherings with David, or Michael as she knew him, smiling and playing the perfect son-in-law. In some of the photos, he wore glasses and had a different hairstyle, subtle changes that would make it harder to connect him to the David I knew if anyone ever saw them together. How could he maintain so many relationships? Olivia asked as we drove home. The time alone would be impossible. That's why he travelled so much, I realised. It wasn't for work, it was to manage his other lives. 3 weeks after David disappeared, while clearing out his things, I found a hidden compartment in the back of his desk drawer. Inside was a locked metal box that I'd never seen before. I broke it open with a hammer, desperation overriding any caution. Inside were 6 different driver's licenses, all with his photo, all with different names. None of them David Reynolds. There were also passports, credit cards, and small notebooks filled with details about different women, their likes, dislikes, family information, important dates. I found 3 pages about me, documenting everything from my favourite flowers to my parents' anniversary. The clinical precision of it made me physically ill. Pages about Olivia and Melissa were there too, along with women I didn't recognise. The man I'd married had been studying us like specimens, using the information to create perfect, customised versions of himself for each target, and I had fallen for it completely. Even more disturbing were the financial documents, detailed plans for gradually extracting money from each woman in his life. For me, it was the joint accounts he'd been slowly draining. For Melissa, it was investments in businesses that didn't exist. For Olivia, the plan was just beginning. Pages outlining how he would convince her to liquidate her inheritance from our grandmother, to invest in a property that would never materialise. I brought everything to the detective handling our case. He whistled softly as he flipped through the evidence. Mrs. Reynolds, or I guess you might want to go back to your maiden name now. I've been tracking guys like this for 15 years. This is one of the most organised operations I've ever seen. Who is he? I asked, desperate for any shred of truth. The detective shook his head. We'll try to find out, but these guys are ghosts. They change identities like most people change clothes. As the weeks passed, more details emerged. The real estate company David claimed to work for had never heard of him. The charity where we met had no record of his generous donation. The private yacht where he proposed had been rented under yet another false name. Every memory, every milestone in our relationship was built on lies. Friends and family members struggled to know what to say. Some avoided me altogether, embarrassed by their own enthusiastic embrace of the man who had deceived us all. Others overcompensated with constant check-ins and awkward attempts at comfort. My parents were devastated, blaming themselves for not seeing through his charm. We should have protected you, my father said, his voice heavy with guilt. He fooled everyone, Dad, I replied. Even the police can't figure out who he really is. The house had to be sold. I couldn't afford the mortgage on my own, and every room held memories I needed to escape. I moved into a small apartment and tried to rebuild my life one painful day at a time. Olivia became my rock, our relationship strengthened by the shared trauma of David's betrayal. One evening, as we sorted through more of David's abandoned belongings, Olivia found an old flash drive hidden in a hollowed-out book. "Should we look?" she asked, holding it up. I hesitated, afraid of what new horrors might be revealed, but nodded. We need to know everything. What we found sent chills down my spine. Detailed surveillance photos of me taken years before we met. Pictures of me leaving my old apartment, shopping at the grocery store, having dinner with friends. There was nothing random about our meeting at the charity event. David, or whoever he was, had selected me long before I ever laid eyes on him. "Oh my God," Olivia whispered. "He was stalking you." The detective confirmed our suspicions. This guy did his homework. He didn't just happen to meet you, he targeted you specifically. "But why me?" I asked, unable to comprehend why anyone would go to such lengths. "Your business was starting to take off. You had family money coming your way eventually. You were single, successful, and trusting. That's the perfect trifecta for these predators." That night, alone in my new apartment, I finally allowed myself to break down completely. 8 years of my life had been an elaborate performance, and I had played my part perfectly. The adoring wife, completely blind to the monster hiding behind her husband's smile. 6 months have passed since the man I knew as David Reynolds walked out of my life. The police investigation continues, but leads are scarce. They've identified at least 12 women across 5 states who fell victim to his schemes over the past decade. The total financial damage is in the millions, but the emotional toll is immeasurable. Olivia and I have healed our relationship, bonding through our shared pain and determination to prevent this from happening to others. We started a support group for victims of romance scams, creating a safe space for women to share their stories without shame or judgment. It turns out there are many others like us, intelligent, successful women who are targeted by master manipulators. The most difficult question I face, both from others and myself, is how I didn't see the signs. How could I live with someone for 8 years and not know who they truly were? The answer is both simple and devastating. David was exceptional at his craft. Every inconsistency had a plausible explanation. Every red flag was covered by a grand gesture or heartfelt confession. He studied me, learned what I wanted to hear, and became exactly what I needed. I've spent countless hours replaying moments from our marriage, searching for clues I missed. The business trips that always seemed to come at convenient times. The friends of his that I never met. The childhood stories that sometimes had subtle inconsistencies. But hindsight makes detectives of us all, and the truth is that David's performance was nearly flawless. One of the most painful realizations came when I found an old conversation between us saved in my phone. I had asked him early in our relationship why he was attracted to me. His response seemed so genuine at the time. "You see the world differently than anyone I've ever met. You find beauty in the smallest details. You make me want to be better, to see things through your eyes." Now I recognize it for what it was. A carefully crafted response designed to make me feel special while revealing nothing about himself. David never shared anything real because there was no real David to share. He was a mirror, reflecting back what each woman wanted to see. The financial aftermath has been nearly as devastating as the emotional one. My business suffered while I was dealing with the investigation and my own trauma. Most of our joint savings were gone. The house, which we were still paying off, had to be sold. I moved into a small apartment and started rebuilding my life piece by piece. There are good days and bad days. On the bad days, I question everything, my judgment, my worth, my ability to trust again. On the good days, I remember that I survived, that his deception says nothing about me and everything about him. I've started dating again cautiously. The first few attempts were disasters. I questioned everything, demanded verification for the smallest details, and generally made both myself and my dates miserable. My therapist helped me find a balance between healthy skepticism and paralyzing suspicion. I'm learning to trust my instincts again, to recognize that what happened with David was extraordinary, not inevitable. Last month, I received a letter with no return address. Inside was a simple note in handwriting I recognized immediately. It wasn't all a lie. D. I burned it without showing anyone. Whether it was truly from him or not didn't matter. Whether he had genuine feelings at some point didn't matter. 8 years of lies aren't negated by moments of truth. The most surprising outcome of this experience has been finding my voice. I've started speaking at conferences about romance scams, warning others about the sophisticated techniques these predators use. Law enforcement officers have told me that romance scammers like David are rarely caught because their victims often don't report the crime out of embarrassment. By sharing my story publicly, I'm helping others come forward. Olivia has been by my side through all of it. Our relationship, tested by David's manipulation, has emerged stronger than ever. She moved into the apartment across the hall from mine, and we've started a small business consulting firm together, helping others protect themselves from fraud. It's rewarding work that has helped us both heal. I still have the box of IDs. The police made copies, but let me keep the originals as evidence. Sometimes I look at them, at the different versions of the same man, and try to imagine the real person behind all those identities. Who was he before he became a con artist? What happened to make him this way? Does he ever regret the pain he's caused? I'll probably never know the answers. The detective handling our case believes David has likely left the country, assuming yet another identity to start the cycle again. It's a thought that keeps me up some nights, knowing that somewhere another woman might be falling for his practiced smile, his attentive nature, his carefully constructed persona. Last week, I received a call from a detective in California. They'd found Melissa, the blonde woman from David's other apartment, dead in her home. The initial investigation suggests suicide, but given the circumstances, they're looking deeper. The news hit me hard, reminding me of how devastating these betrayals can be. She left a note, the detective told me solemnly. She said she couldn't live with the shame of being so thoroughly deceived. I hung up the phone and cried for this woman I'd met only once, another casualty of the man who had destroyed so many lives. Her death sparked a new determination in me. I wouldn't let David's deception define me. I wouldn't let it break me the way it had broken Melissa. 2 days after that call, something unexpected happened. I was having coffee at my favourite cafe when a woman approached my table. She was elegant, in her 60s perhaps, with piercing blue eyes that seemed hauntingly familiar. "Are you Emma Reynolds?" she asked. I nodded cautiously, immediately on guard. "My name is Diana Blackwood," she said. "I believe we share a connection." She sat down and placed a photo on the table between us, a much younger version of herself with a teenage boy. The boy's face was instantly recognisable, even decades younger. It was David. "His real name is Andrew," she said softly. "Andrew Blackwood. He's my son." The world seemed to stop as I processed her words. After months of questions, here was someone who might have answers. "I've been tracking him for years," Diana continued, "trying to make amends for the damage he's caused. When I saw your interview on the news, I knew I had to find you." Over the next 2 hours, Diana shared the story of her son. How he had been a troubled child, charming but manipulative. How he had started with small cons as a teenager before graduating to more elaborate schemes. How she had tried everything to help him, therapy, tough love, even turning him into the police once, but nothing changed his path. "I lost him to this life long ago," she said, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "But I can't stop trying to undo some of the harm he's caused." Diana had been following Andrew's trail for over a decade, reaching out to his victims when she could find them, offering what support she could. She'd started a foundation to help romance scam victims recover financially and emotionally. "I know it doesn't change what happened to you," she said, handing me her card. "But if you ever need anything, resources, support, just someone who understands, please call me." As she stood to leave, I asked the question that had been burning in my mind. "Do you think he ever loved any of us, even for a moment?" Diana paused, considering her words carefully. Andrew's understanding of love is fundamentally broken. He can mimic it perfectly, but I don't think he can truly feel it. And I'm so sorry for that, both for him and for all of you who believed in him. That conversation was a turning point for me. Knowing David's, Andrew's, real name didn't change what he'd done, but it demystified him. He wasn't a ghost or a phantom or a master criminal beyond comprehension. He was just a broken man who had learned to exploit others rather than face his own emptiness. 3 weeks after meeting Diana, I received a text message from an unknown number. Storage Unit 247. Lincoln Facilities. Code 8613. What you're looking for is inside. I debated whether to go. It could be a trap. It could be nothing. But my curiosity won out. I asked Detective Morgan to accompany me, just to be safe. The storage facility was in an industrial area on the outskirts of town. Unit 247 was at the very back, away from the main office. The keypad beeped as I entered the code, and the padlock clicked open. Inside, stacked neatly against the walls, were dozens of boxes, each labelled with a woman's name. Mine, Olivia's, Melissa's, and at least 20 others I didn't recognise. "What the hell is this?" Detective Morgan whispered. Each box contained the same types of items: notebooks filled with personal details, photographs, copies of financial documents, and small personal mementos. Mine had the pearl earrings I thought I'd lost 2 years ago, a birthday card from my father that had disappeared from my desk, a lock of my hair. "It's his trophy room," Detective Morgan said, his voice tight with disgust. "These guys sometimes keep mementos of their cons." But what shocked me most was a laptop sitting on a small desk in the corner. It was unlocked, open to a video file labelled Final Statement. We played it, and there he was, David, or Andrew, or whatever his real name might be, looking directly into the camera. "If you're watching this, it means I'm gone," he began, his familiar voice sending chills down my spine. "Not dead, just moved on to the next chapter. But before I go, I owe you all some answers." What followed was a 90-minute confession. Names, dates, details of every con he had pulled over 15 years. How he selected his targets. How he maintained multiple identities. How he avoided detection. He named co-conspirators, revealed offshore account numbers, and explained exactly how he had forged documents. "I'm not sorry for who I am," he said near the end, his expression coldly pragmatic. "But I'm tired of running. By the time you find this, I'll have started over somewhere new with a clean slate. Consider this my parting gift, the chance to understand what happened to you, the chance for closure that I never got." The video ended abruptly, his face freezing in a half-smile that I once found charming, but now saw for what it truly was: empty, practiced, and utterly false. Detective Morgan was already on the phone calling for backup. "This is everything we need," he said excitedly. "Account numbers, accomplices, techniques. This could help us catch dozens of these guys." But I wasn't listening anymore. I was staring at a small velvet box that had fallen from my container. Inside was my grandmother's wedding ring, an heirloom I thought was lost forever when David cleaned out our safe deposit box before disappearing. Tucked beside it was a handwritten note in familiar handwriting. "Emma, some lies were necessary, some weren't. This belonged to your family, long before it belonged to my con. I slipped the ring onto my finger, a strange calm washing over me. This wasn't a gesture of love or remorse. It was one final manipulation, a way to keep me wondering, to maintain some power over my emotions, even as he vanished from my life. But it failed. Standing in that storage unit, surrounded by the meticulous evidence of his deceptions, I felt something unexpected. Freedom. The man I married never existed. The life we shared was a carefully orchestrated illusion. But my pain, my resilience, my recovery, those were real. That night, I sat with Olivia on my balcony, watching the sunset with glasses of wine in hand. "Do you ever wonder where he is now?" she asked quietly. I twisted my grandmother's ring around my finger, feeling its familiar weight. "No," I answered truthfully. "I don't care where he is. I only care where I'm going." 6 months later, the FBI arrested Andrew Blackwood in Buenos Aires, living under yet another false identity. His confession video had provided the evidence needed for an international manhunt. Diana called to tell me the news herself. "Will you testify against him?" she asked. I thought about it for a long moment before answering. Yes, not for revenge, but for closure. For all of us who deserve to look him in the eye and take back our power. When I finally faced him across the courtroom, he looked smaller somehow, less mysterious, less powerful. The charm that had once seemed so natural now appeared mechanical, a performance that no longer convinced anyone. Our eyes met briefly as I took the stand. I expected to feel anger, hatred, or even fear. Instead, I felt nothing but pity for a man so empty that he had to steal other people's lives instead of building his own. "Miss Collins," the prosecutor began, using my maiden name that I had reclaimed, "can you tell the court how you met the defendant?" I leaned toward the microphone, my voice steady. "I met a man who called himself David Reynolds at a charity event 8 years ago. But the man sitting in this courtroom today, I've never met him. I don't know who he is." Andrew's face remained impassive, but I saw something flicker in his eyes. Perhaps what was the realization that his greatest deception had failed. He had stolen 8 years of my life, but he hadn't broken me. He hadn't defined me. As I left the courthouse that day, reporters shouted questions. How does it feel to face the man who betrayed you? What would you say to other women in your situation? Do you regret your marriage? I paused on the steps, the sun warm on my face. Olivia stood beside me, her hand steady on my arm. I thought carefully before answering. "I don't regret my past," I said finally. "I learned from it. I grew through it. And most importantly, I survived it." I smiled at the cameras, not as a victim, but as a woman who had walked through fire and emerged stronger. "The man I married never existed," I continued, "but I do. And my story isn't over yet." That night, I removed my grandmother's ring and placed it in a small box on my dresser, not as a reminder of betrayal, but as a symbol of my family's resilience that had been passed down to me. Then I opened my laptop and began writing the first chapter of my memoir. The Phantom Husband: How I Survived and Thrived After the Ultimate Betrayal. The book would become a bestseller. The support group Olivia and I started would grow into a national organisation, helping thousands of romance scam victims. And the women who once believed in fairy tale romances would learn to believe in something far more powerful: herself. Sometimes people ask if I'll ever trust enough to love again. I always smile at the question. The truth is, I already do love again. I love the woman I've become. I love the life I've rebuilt from ashes. I love the strength I never knew I had until it was tested by fire. And as for romantic love, I'm open to the possibility. But this time, I'm not looking for someone to complete my story. I'm looking for someone worthy of joining the story I'm already writing. A story of resilience, redemption, and the remarkable power of starting over. The man I knew as David took almost everything from me, but he missed the most important thing: my ability to rise from the ashes of his deception and build something beautiful from the ruins. That's the thing about phantoms. They may haunt you for a while, but eventually they fade away, and what remains is what matters: the truth of who you are when everything else is stripped away. My name is Emma Collins, and this is just the beginning.